The floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he reached the top of the stairs, his hand frozen on the banister. Through the partially open bedroom door, his wife's voice drifted out, clear and cold as winter rain. "I just wish he'd disappear, you know? Like, if he vanished before my birthday, that would be absolutely perfect." He felt his heart stutter in his chest. 8 years of marriage, and it had come to this. He pressed himself against the hallway wall, barely breathing, as his wife continued her phone conversation. "No, I'm serious. I can't stand looking at him anymore. The way he chews, the way he breathes, even the way he tries to be helpful, it all makes my skin crawl." She laughed, a sound he'd once found musical but now seemed sharp enough to cut glass. 35 next week, and I want to start it fresh. Without him. His mind raced through the possibilities. Was she planning to divorce him? But why the cryptic language about disappearing? Why the specific mention of her birthday? Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. "You really think it'll work?" his wife asked after a pause. "And you're sure about the timing?" Okay. Yes, I trust you. I know you've done this before." Done what before? He felt ice spreading through his veins. "I'll make sure everything's in place. The neighbors have already commented on how tense things have been between us. Mrs. Patterson from next door practically interrogates me every time I take out the trash." Another pause. Perfect. So Thursday night. Then. He'll never see it coming. Thursday. That was 3 days away. 3 days before whatever nightmare scenario his wife was planning would unfold. He moved silently back down the stairs, his engineer's mind already cataloguing evidence and analyzing possibilities. In his home office, he sat in the darkness, staring at nothing. The woman he'd built a life with, the person he'd trusted above all others, was planning something that required him to disappear. And she had an accomplice, someone who'd apparently done this before. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. He went through the motions of normalcy, heating up leftover pasta, asking about her day, pretending he hadn't heard his own death sentence being pronounced. She smiled at him across the dinner table, that same smile he'd fallen in love with in college, and he wondered when exactly it had become a mask. "How's the project at work going?" she asked, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Actually, they want me to visit the satellite office upstate," he lied smoothly, surprising himself with how easily the deception came. "Probably heading out Thursday morning, back Sunday." Her eyes lit up, actually lit up, with barely contained excitement. "Oh, Thursday. Yeah, last-minute thing. You know how it is." He watched her carefully, noting the way her shoulders relaxed, how her grip on the fork loosened. "That's fine," she said, too quickly. "Totally fine. You should go. It's important for your career." That night, lying beside her in bed, he stared at the ceiling while she slept peacefully. Or pretended to sleep. He couldn't be sure of anything anymore. The woman next to him was a stranger wearing his wife's face. By morning, he'd made his decision. He would pretend to leave for the trip, but instead, he'd stay. He'd rent a car under his brother's name, book a cheap motel on the other side of town, and watch. Wait. Record. Whatever she was planning, whatever scheme she and her mystery accomplice had cooked up, he'd document every second of it. He'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let someone, even someone he'd loved, destroy him without a fight. If she wanted him to disappear, she'd have to try a lot harder than this. And if his suspicions were correct, if this was something truly sinister, then he'd make sure the only person disappearing would be her, straight into a courtroom and then a cell. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday evening found him in his office, the door locked, organizing his counter-operation with the precision that had made him successful in his career. On his laptop screen, multiple tabs displayed rental car agencies, budget motels, and electronic stores. He'd withdrawn cash from 3 different ATMs to avoid leaving a clear paper trail, $2,000 that his wife wouldn't notice missing from their account. "Honey." Her voice called from downstairs. "Dinner's ready." The domesticity of it all felt obscene. She was down there, probably texting her accomplice, planning whatever horror awaited him, while simultaneously roasting chicken and steaming vegetables. Coming, he called back, quickly closing his laptop. Dinner was another exercise in surrealism. She'd made his favorite meal, herb roasted chicken with garlic mashed potatoes, and even opened a bottle of wine. I thought we should have a nice evening before you leave, she said, pouring him a generous glass. I know I've been distant lately. Work stress, you know. He watched the wine swirl in his glass, suddenly paranoid. Would she drug him? Was this part of the plan? But no, she poured from the same bottle into her own glass and drank deeply. It's been hard on both of us, he agreed, pushing his food around his plate. Maybe when I get back, we should talk. Really talk. Something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? It vanished so quickly he couldn't be sure. Maybe, she said softly. Maybe we should. After dinner, he made a show of packing his suitcase while she watched from the bedroom doorway. He included everything he'd actually need: toiletries, clothes, his good watch, maintaining the illusion perfectly. Don't forget your charger, she reminded him. Right, thanks. He added it to the bag, noting how she observed every item he packed. Was she making sure he'd really be gone? Checking that he'd have no reason to return early? That night, he barely slept. Every sound made him wonder if she was starting her plan early. At 3 a.m., he heard her get up and move around downstairs. He lay frozen, listening to cabinet doors opening and closing, the soft murmur of her voice on the phone. When she returned to bed 40 minutes later, he pretended to be asleep, his heart hammering against his ribs. Thursday morning arrived with grey skies that matched his mood. He loaded his suitcase into his car with exaggerated care, making sure the neighbors saw him leaving. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden, of course, and he waved cheerfully. Business trip, he called out. Drive safe, she responded, but her smile seemed knowing, almost pitying. Had his wife been planting seeds with the neighbors? Building a narrative? His wife kissed him goodbye at the door, and for just a moment, holding her close, he wanted to be wrong about everything. He wanted this to be paranoia, a misunderstanding, anything but what his gut told him it was. I love you, she whispered against his neck. The words should have comforted him. Instead, they felt like a eulogy. Love you too, he managed. He drove around the corner and parked at the public library, watching his house through a borrowed set of binoculars. At 9:15 a.m., a silver sedan pulled into his driveway. A man got out, tall, athletic, around 40. He watched as his wife opened the door and practically pulled the stranger inside. So there was someone else. The affair piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He drove to the rental agency across town, paid cash for a nondescript grey sedan, and checked into the lakeside motel using his brother's credit card. His brother, currently teaching English in South Korea, wouldn't notice the charge, and had agreed to help when he'd called him yesterday with a vague story about marriage problems. The motel room smelled of industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. He set up his laptop on the sagging desk and began his surveillance plan. He'd already installed hidden cameras in his house months ago, a security measure after a break-in on their street. He'd never told his wife about them. 3 cameras covered the living room, kitchen, and hallway. The feeds streamed directly to his phone and laptop. On the screen, he watched his wife and her lover in his living room, drinking his coffee, sitting on his couch. They were laughing about something. He plugged in his voice recorder. He'd need audio evidence too. Then he made a call to a lawyer friend, leaving a vague voicemail about needing advice on protecting assets. Finally, he contacted the non-emergency police line and asked hypothetically about what evidence would be needed for various scenarios. The rest of Thursday passed in agonizing slowness. He watched them through his cameras. They barely touched each other. This wasn't about passion, he realized. This was business. They spent hours going over documents he couldn't quite make out, their heads bent together in concentration. At 8 p.m., the man left. His wife immediately called someone else. Tomorrow night, she said. Everything's set. Tomorrow night. Friday. The day before her birthday. He ordered pizza to his motel room and didn't taste a single bite. Tomorrow, he'd learn exactly what his wife had planned. And tomorrow, whatever trap she'd set would snap shut, just not on the person she expected. Friday dawned with unseasonable warmth, the kind of beautiful day that felt like a mockery of his situation. He'd slept in 2-hour intervals, jerking awake each time his phone buzzed with a notification from the security cameras. His wife had been up since 6, cleaning the house with manic energy, moving furniture, checking her phone every few minutes. From his motel room, he watched her through the camera feeds, trying to understand the staging. She'd rearranged the living room, moving the coffee table closer to the couch, angling the lamp differently. Why? What was she setting up? At noon, her phone buzzed, and he saw her check it, smile, and type back furiously. Minutes later, the silver sedan returned. The man entered without knocking, clearly comfortable, clearly expected. They sat at the kitchen table, and he leaned closer to his screen, adjusting the volume on his laptop. "You're sure about this?" the man asked. His voice was smooth, educated. "Once we start, there's no going back." "I'm sure," his wife replied. "I've thought about nothing else for months. He's ruined my life long enough." He felt sick. What had he done to ruin her life? He'd worked hard, paid the bills, tried to be a good husband. They'd had problems, sure, what couple didn't, but nothing that warranted this level of hatred. "Okay," the man continued. "So tonight, around 8. You'll call him, make it seem urgent that he comes home. When he gets here, we'll already be in position." "And you're sure the bruising will look real?" his wife asked. Bruising. The word hung in the air like poison gas. "I've done this 4 times before," the man said. "The trick is knowing exactly where to strike. It looks dramatic, photographs perfectly, but causes minimal actual damage. You'll have visible marks, but nothing permanent." His wife nodded, touching her arms as if already feeling phantom bruises. "The police will see a classic domestic violence situation," the man continued. "His fingerprints are all over the house already. He lives here. We'll stage some broken items, make sure there are signs of a struggle. You'll have the marks, I'll have witnesses who'll swear they heard arguing. By the time the police arrive, it'll be open and shut." "And you're sure they'll arrest him immediately?" "Absolutely. In domestic violence cases, they arrest first and ask questions later, especially with visible injuries and a frightened wife. He'll spend the night in jail minimum, probably longer. With his prints everywhere and our testimonies, he'll be looking at charges. Even if they're eventually dropped, the arrest record stays. His reputation, his job, all destroyed." She was planning to frame him. To have him arrested for assault he never committed. To destroy his life with false accusations. He sat back in his cheap motel chair, mind reeling. This was worse than he'd imagined. Not murder, but something almost more insidious, the calculated destruction of his entire existence through lies and manufactured evidence. "What about afterward?" his wife asked. "When he gets out?" "Restraining order," the man said smoothly. "You'll file immediately. He won't be able to come within 100 yards of you or the house. And that's when you file for divorce. With the arrest record and restraining order, you'll get everything: the house, his retirement accounts, alimony. He'll be lucky if he keeps his job. And us." Her voice was soft, almost coy. "And us," the man echoed, reaching across to take her hand. "We can finally be together. No more sneaking around. You'll be free of him, financially secure, and we can start our life." So it was about money and the affair. His wife wanted everything he'd built, wanted to destroy him, and move on to her next victim. Because if this man had done this 4 times before, she was just another mark in his con. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands. He needed to call the police now, warn them, show them the footage. But would they believe him? Would they act on his word alone? Or would they need to catch her in the act? His lawyer friend called back just then. "Hey, sorry for the delay. What's going on?" He explained everything in rapid sentences: the overheard conversation, the surveillance footage, the plan to frame him. "Don't call the police yet," the lawyer advised. "Here's what you need to do. Let them try their plan, but don't show up. When your wife calls you to come home, stay away. Let her call the police when you don't appear. Record everything. Then, and only then, you bring your evidence to the authorities. You'll have her filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly even attempted extortion. But you need her to actually make that false report. That's risky, he said. It's necessary. Right now, you have a plan discussed in private. That's conspiracy, but hard to prosecute. But once she calls the police and lies to them, once she officially files a false report, you've got her cold. Plus, you'll have proof that she was never in danger, that the whole thing was fabricated. It made sense, in a horrible way. He'd have to let his wife believe she'd won, let her make that call to the police, let her spin her web of lies to the authorities. And then he'd pull out the recordings and watch it all collapse around her. One more thing, the lawyer added. Record everything today. Every conversation, every movement. Timestamp everything. When this goes to court, you'll want an airtight timeline. He spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything, downloading footage, backing it up to 3 separate cloud services. At 6 p.m., his wife and her accomplice were still in the house, preparing. He watched her practice her expressions in the mirror: fear, terror, relief. She was rehearsing her victim role. At 7:45 p.m., his phone rang. Her number. Honey. Her voice sounded strained, scared. I know you're not supposed to be back until Sunday, but something's happened. Can you come home, please? I really need you. What's wrong? He asked, impressed by his own steady voice. I can't explain over the phone. Please, just come home. It's urgent. I'm 3 hours away. Please. She was crying now, real tears if the camera didn't lie. I need you. This was it. The moment where he was supposed to rush home to comfort his frightened wife and walk straight into a trap. I'll leave right now, he lied. I'll be there as fast as I can. Call the police if you're in danger. No. No police. Just you. Please hurry. He hung up and watched his screens as his wife turned to her accomplice with a smile. He's coming. Now came the hardest part, waiting to see what they'd do when he didn't arrive. The next 2 hours were among the longest of his life. He sat in his dingy motel room, eyes fixed on his laptop screen, watching his wife and her accomplice prepare their theatrical performance. At 8:30 p.m., they began staging the scene. The man, he'd learned from a reverse phone lookup that his name was David Reeves, a life coach with a suspicious gap in his LinkedIn employment history, carefully broke a lamp, placing the pieces just so. His wife took off her earrings, scattering them near the couch as if they'd been ripped off in a struggle. They knocked over a side table, spilled wine on the carpet, and created what looked like the aftermath of a violent confrontation. Remember, David instructed, you're terrified but trying to be brave. You feared for your life. He came home unexpectedly. You told him you wanted a divorce, and he lost control. You managed to lock yourself in the bathroom and call for help. She nodded, practicing her frightened expression again. It was disturbing how easily it came to her. At 9:15 p.m., his wife's phone rang, a call from Mrs. Patterson next door. Through the audio feed, he heard his wife's voice shift instantly into a trembling, tearful tone. Oh, Mrs. Patterson, I'm okay. There was just some noise. I dropped something. My husband's away on business. No, everything's fine. Thank you for checking. Building the narrative, he realized. The concerned neighbor, the wife alone, the stage being set. At 9:45 p.m., David pulled out what looked like a makeup kit. He opened it to reveal various theatrical cosmetics, the kind used in film production. With practiced efficiency, he began applying makeup to create convincing bruises on his wife's arms, neck, and face. Dark purples and blues bloomed under his careful brushwork, fake injuries that would photograph perfectly. You're an artist, his wife said, admiring the work in her phone's camera. I've had practice, David replied. Though usually my clients are more grateful after. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that the others were more invested in showing their appreciation. His smile was predatory. But we can discuss that later. After you get your settlement. A flash of uncertainty crossed her face, but she pushed it aside. Let's just focus on tonight. By 10:30 p.m., they were both growing agitated. He'd promised to arrive within 3 hours, and that deadline was approaching. His phone rang again, his wife, her voice now genuinely stressed. "Where are you? You said you'd be here." "Traffic," he lied. "Accident on the highway. I'm stuck. Maybe another hour." He hung up before she could respond and watched her throw her phone across the room in frustration. "This isn't working," she snapped at David. "The bruises will start to fade. We needed him here by now." "Calm down," David said, but he looked worried too. "Call him again in 30 minutes. Make it more urgent. Tell him you're bleeding or something." But at 11:15 p.m., something unexpected happened. Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door, peering through the window with evident concern. His wife froze, caught between staying in character and avoiding contact. "Your lights have been on for hours and I saw someone else's car," Mrs. Patterson called through the door. "Is everything all right, dear?" David swore under his breath and ducked into the kitchen, out of sight. His wife opened the door a crack, careful to keep her bruised side in shadow. "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just a friend visiting. My husband's delayed getting home." "Your face," Mrs. Patterson gasped, catching sight of the makeup in the porch light. "What happened to your face?" His wife's hand flew to her cheek, realizing too late that she'd been caught with visible injuries and no explanation. Her mind raced for a plausible story. I fell. Earlier. It's nothing." But Mrs. Patterson was already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police. Don't argue with me, young lady." "No. Please don't." His wife's panic was real now, the plan spiraling out of control. "It's not what you think." But Mrs. Patterson had already dialed. Within minutes, he heard sirens approaching through his audio feed. David emerged from the kitchen, furious. "This is your fault," he hissed. "You should have kept the nosy neighbor out of it." "You said the bruises would be perfect," she shot back. The doorbell rang. Police. David looked around frantically, realizing he was trapped. If he ran, it would look suspicious. If he stayed, he'd have to explain his presence. "Bathroom," his wife whispered. "Hide in the bathroom. I'll say I'm alone." He watched David scramble upstairs as his wife answered the door. 2 officers stood there, their expressions professional but concerned. We received a call about a possible domestic disturbance. Are you all right?" His wife's face crumpled on cue. Yes, no. My husband." She touched her bruised face delicately. "Is your husband here now?" The female officer stepped closer, examining the marks. "No, he left. He's on a business trip. Or he was supposed to be." The tears came easily now, mixing real panic with theatrical performance. "He came back unexpectedly. We had a fight. He hit me and then left again." "Do you know where he went?" "No. He just left. I've been calling but he won't answer." The male officer was already looking around the living room, noting the broken lamp, the overturned table, the wine stain. "Looks like quite a struggle. Do you need medical attention?" "No, I just want him to stay away." "We'll need to take a full statement," the female officer said gently. "And we'll need to locate your husband." His phone rang again, a call from an unknown number. The police, likely, trying to reach him. He let it go to voicemail, watching his screen as his wife gave her statement, weaving a story of months of verbal abuse culminating in tonight's violence. She was convincing, he had to admit. The tears, the trembling hands, the way she flinched when the male officer moved too quickly. But upstairs, hidden in the bathroom, David was making a crucial mistake. Thinking the police would leave soon, he'd pulled out his phone and was texting someone. The light from his screen was visible under the bathroom door. The male officer noticed it. I thought you said you were alone." Her eyes went wide. "I am." "Then why is there light coming from under that bathroom door?" Everything was falling apart, and all he could do was watch from his motel room, 3 miles away, as his wife's perfect plan collapsed into chaos. This wasn't how either of them had expected the night to end. He picked up his phone and began recording a video message for the police. It was time to add his evidence to their investigation. The chaos unfolded rapidly on his screen. The male officer had his hand on his weapon, calling up the stairs. "This is the police. Come out of the bathroom with your hands visible." His wife's face was pure panic now, all pretense gone. "Wait, he's just a friend." A friend hiding in your bathroom while you report domestic violence. The female officer's expression had shifted from sympathetic to suspicious. "I'm going to need you to step outside with me." David emerged from the bathroom, hands raised, wearing an expression of wounded innocence that must have worked on his previous victims. "Officers, I can explain. I'm just a friend. She called me after her husband attacked her. I came to make sure she was safe." "And you hid in the bathroom because?" the male officer asked. "I panicked. I thought her husband might have come back." It was almost believable. Almost. But he could see the female officer studying the scene with increasing skepticism, the too perfect placement of broken items, the lack of defensive wounds, the convenient timing. He made his decision. He called the police station directly. "This is regarding the domestic disturbance call at 847, Maple Drive," he said when they answered. "I'm the husband. I'm not at the house and haven't been since Thursday morning. I have video evidence that proves everything happening there tonight is staged." 30 minutes later, he was sitting in an interview room at the police station, his laptop open, showing Detective Sarah Chen and her partner the footage he'd compiled. They watched in silence as his wife and David discussed their plan, applied the makeup, staged the scene. "How long have you had cameras in your house?" Detective Chen asked. 6 months. After a break-in on our street. My wife knew about the security system, but not about these specific cameras. They're hidden, but they were installed legally in my own home." The detective nodded, making notes. "And you left Thursday morning because?" "I overheard her Tuesday night saying she wished I would disappear before her birthday. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew I needed to protect myself. So I pretended to leave town but stayed local to gather evidence." "Why didn't you come to us immediately? Would you have believed me?" A husband claiming his wife was going to frame him for abuse, with no evidence except an overheard phone conversation? "I needed proof of the conspiracy, not just the plan." Detective Chen couldn't argue with that. They continued watching the footage, including the part where David explicitly discussed having done this 4 times before. "We'll need to look into Mr. Reeves' history," her partner said. "If he's done this before, there might be other victims." Back at his house, the situation was deteriorating. A second pair of officers had arrived after his call, and now his wife and David were separated, being questioned individually. Their stories, rehearsed as they were, started to diverge under pressure. His wife insisted David had only arrived after the fictional attack. David claimed he'd been there for hours as a friend. The female officer noted that his wife's injuries, under closer inspection, looked suspiciously like stage makeup. When questioned about the perfect placement of broken items, his wife fumbled for explanations. And then Mrs. Patterson dropped the bombshell. She'd been at the station giving her own statement. "I saw that man's car arrive around noon," she told the officers. "I thought it was odd because she'd told me her husband was out of town. They've been there together all day. I could see them through the windows before they closed the curtains around dinner time." The timeline didn't match his wife's story at all. At 1:30 a.m., Detective Chen brought him to a larger conference room where his wife and David sat at opposite ends, both now significantly less composed. His wife's carefully applied makeup bruises looked garish under the fluorescent lights, obviously fake upon close examination. "Would you like to revise your statement?" Detective Chen asked his wife, placing printouts of video screenshots on the table. His wife looked at the images, her and David discussing the plan, David applying makeup, her practicing her frightened expression, and something in her broke. Not remorse, but the realization that she'd been caught. "It was his idea," she said, pointing at David. "He said it would be easy. That he'd helped other women get free from bad marriages. "I want a lawyer," David said immediately. "Too late for that," Detective Chen replied. "We've been investigating you for the past hour. Turns out you have quite a history. 3 previous clients, all divorced women who suddenly had their ex-husbands arrested for domestic violence. All cases mysteriously dropped later, but not before the women got favorable divorce settlements." David's face went pale. "The difference," the detective continued, "is that in those cases, we didn't have video evidence of you staging the crimes. We couldn't prove conspiracy. But tonight we have everything." She turned to his wife. "And you? False police report, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, filing false charges. You're looking at serious prison time." His wife's carefully constructed facade shattered completely. She started crying, real tears this time, not the performed ones from earlier. "I just wanted out. I just wanted to be free." "You could have gotten a divorce," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken directly to her all evening. She looked at him, and for just a moment, he saw the woman he'd married. Then her expression hardened. "And give you half of everything I helped build? After I wasted 8 years of my life on you? No. You deserved this." "I deserved to be framed for assault? To lose my job, my reputation, my freedom? You deserve to feel as trapped as I felt every single day of our marriage." There it was. The truth beneath all the schemes and lies. She hadn't just wanted his money or to be with David. She'd wanted him to suffer. 3 weeks later, he sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the final documents. His wife had taken a plea deal, 3 years in prison for conspiracy and filing false reports. David was fighting his charges, but facing significantly more time given his pattern of behavior. The district attorney was working with his previous victims to potentially file additional charges. His divorce was proceeding uncontested. He'd get the house, his retirement accounts, and sole possession of their joint assets. His wife would get nothing but her prison sentence. "There's one more thing," his lawyer said, sliding a newspaper across the desk. "Thought you might want to see this." It was a small article about David's arrest, mentioning his life coaching business and how he'd been running a sophisticated scam targeting unhappy married women, convincing them to frame their husbands for domestic violence in exchange for favorable divorce settlements and ongoing consulting fees. He wasn't in love with her, he realized aloud. He was conning her too. Probably, his lawyer agreed. She was just another mark. Another unhappy wife he could exploit. There was something almost poetic about it. His wife had thought she was so clever, partnering with someone to destroy him. She'd never realized she was the victim of a con artist until it was too late. The following Saturday, what would have been her 35th birthday, he moved the last of her belongings into storage. The house felt larger without her presence, emptier but somehow cleaner. He'd had the locks changed, the security system upgraded, and started the process of truly making it his own space. His phone buzzed with a message from his brother in Korea. Heard everything got resolved. "You okay?" He typed back, "Yeah, finally." Mrs. Patterson knocked on his door that evening with a casserole and an apology for not realizing what was happening sooner. "You couldn't have known," he told her. "None of us really knew who she was." That night, alone in his house, he reviewed the footage one final time before deleting it all. His wife's voice echoed through the speakers. "I wish he'd disappear before my birthday. That would be perfect." She'd gotten her birthday surprise, just not the one she'd planned. And he'd learned a valuable lesson about trust, about watching for warning signs, about protecting himself. But more than that, he'd learned about his own strength. When faced with betrayal and destruction, he'd stayed calm, gathered evidence, and outmaneuvered opponents who'd thought he was oblivious. He'd played the long game and won. As he shut down his laptop and turned off the lights, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: free. His wife had wanted to trap him, destroy him, make him disappear. Instead, she'd freed him from a marriage built on lies. Sometimes, he thought, the perfect revenge is simply the truth.